interaction. PPE gear was required. So there was a lot of training that was provided for anybody participating in that, which was a state-backed initiative. So my sense is, then why was the same training then not deployed to the security guards? And if it's an expectation of a service provider who's got a contract from government to do a task, surely the burden would lie with them. I mean, they're the ones who are supposed to roll out the training.
But see,
if the guards aren't rolling,
why are we speculating? I mean, there's been an inquiry into all of this. Everybody's lined up and said, do you know? No. Do you know? No, nobody knows. Do you know?
I reckon this is the most Australian thing ever. There's been a gap there, and a bloke's just pulled up in his ute with a couple of mates, and they've gone, job's on, boys. Yeah, we got it. Yeah, we got the security. Yeah, got all the paperwork, just haven't got it on me. I think this is it's one of those things that Aubrey Appleby always said, and that poor health minister, she's been given the heave-ho, and to stab someone in the back, you must first be 100% behind them. So all that stuff goes on. Why you would refuse free soldiers, fully trained soldiers, and go with, the dodgy brothers security, it just completely baffles me. And that's the reason no one is going to come out and say that this has gone on. This has got to hurt Dan Andrews and this whole thing. And once you start losing people along the way, there's more people on the outside. He's under a bit of pressure.
Geraldine, I'm reading from the inquiry today. Victoria's bungled hotel quarantine scheme is responsible for the deaths of 768 people and 18,000 infections. And at the inquiry, they were told counsel assisting said one only needs to pause and reflect on those figures to appreciate the full scope of devastation and despair. The program should have been accompanied, as Tasneem was saying, by intensive and ongoing monitoring. The Victorian government failed to ensure it was done.
Yes, look, I think it's pretty, we can laugh, and that was very helpful, but amusing from Ewan. Look, I was reflecting on this, in the Black Saturday bushfire Royal Commission, as I recall, correct me if you can remember, it was specifically came down to a lack of accountability and running down who was responsible for what. This was a similar issue, as I remember, from Black Saturday. And it has left me wondering about the business of accountability in government. And I just don't understand how this has occurred, except I think I'm entitled to say, and I'm well aware I'll probably be flooded with Victorians saying, what? You're saying this from Sydney, Is this a systemic issue? In the Victorian situation. I mean, I can't believe it is, but I do see very similar things. I mean, I think that's got to be an element of failure. You've just got to face the fact that that amounts to modern government failure.
And when you say systemic, do you mean systemic incompetence or systemic issues with accountability? I mean, or are you just reflecting on this idea of sort of this creeping, what was the expression?
Creeping assumptions.
Creeping assumptions. I mean, major decisions in the midst of a public health epidemic that are just made as just a creeping assumption.
Well, that's what's so incomprehensible about this. I think I am talking about systemic problems with accountability. I think that is what I'm saying. I was reading the other day that in the early years of World War II, John Curtin nearly went mad trying to get people to take it seriously. It took a while for Australians to say, my God, the Japanese are at the door. And somehow there's something about that in this, that in Victoria, look, it's not that serious, we'll cope, and they didn't. Now, that's awfully hard to say. I don't like saying this, actually, but to me, that's what I'm living with. And I'm sure Victorians are thinking about this.
But Tasneem, are they?
Yeah, look, I hear what you're saying, Geraldine, but I also want to counter that with the fact that we have got the numbers down really effectively, and that does show like him or hate him, the numbers have been brought down to 5 today from 750. And that doesn't happen by accident. That happens through a concerted level of responsibility and action and coordination. Not everyone has loved the way he's gotten there, but he's gotten there. And even his fiercest detractors and critics couldn't argue that this is the case. These numbers coming down to the extent that they have is anything but a result of a very focused and concerted effort, like I said.
Oh, yes.
But
You've done that.
Downplay the numbers.
It's admirable, but did you have to go through all that? That's the point. Did you have to go? You did by the time it got to this point, but, you know, really, you shouldn't have had to go through all that.
Nick, how does it look from your perspective?
I mean, I agree that I'm pretty amazed at if you look at the curve and just see the rate of decline in the infections as soon as Victoria locked down again. But I guess in terms of the fighting over who's responsible, that seems, you look at the US, you see the Trump administration, everybody is infighting and trying to cast blame on scientific figures and other leaders. Trump is lobbing grenades at governors that have tried to lock down and saying that's not the right thing to do. States that have reopened too early in the US have seen cases rebound, and they're still high. I have a hard time imagining any state in the US could do what Victoria's done and go from 700 cases down to 5 in 6 or 7 weeks.
Ewan, I guess the question that came up over the weekend is that as citizens, we want to assume, in the midst of a crisis and all the time, that somebody somewhere knows what's going on. Right?
I think that's the key here, isn't it? That somewhere, someone's got to take responsibility for this. At some stage, someone would have had to sit there and say, look, the Prime Minister has offered us fully trained Australian soldiers to go in and look after all these people. And someone has said no. Someone has said no, that we've got a better system. And they've got blokes in there, and it's like the scene from Mean Girls where Lindsay Lohan's dad grounds her, but she still goes out. The guards are on there, but they just let them go shopping. This has been an absolute... I'm trying to think of another word. It's been abominable what's actually happened here. And from a Queensland perspective, we got Anastasia Palaszczuk sitting there, and we're arguing that the border should be open because we've got our numbers so well under control. And I do understand that coming from North Queensland, where we have 90% of our housing is detached, we don't have a lot of public transport, we have a lot of sun and heat and that sort of thing. So we don't have that transmission that they're going to have in the big cities. But Sydney's killing Melbourne in this, and Perth is killing Melbourne in this, Adelaide's killing Melbourne in this, and it all stems back to, as Geraldine says, somewhere along the line has said, well, I don't care. And somewhere along the line, someone is setting up meetings Daniel Andrews has set up meetings to make sure he's not being told.
Yes, I'm not sure we can conclude all of that exactly, that somebody said we don't care, but nevertheless. Now, face masks have become the unexpected must-have accessory of 2020, so it's perhaps no surprise that they're already finding their way onto the runways and catwalks of the world of high-end fashion. But are any of them actually functional? The Mix's Richard Mockler has been looking at some of the more stylish masks on offer.
Despite pandemic restrictions, fashion weeks in New York, London and Milan have hit the runway. But one of the biggest challenges for designers in 2020 has been incorporating the latest accessory on everybody's lips: the face mask. While most of the face masks at various fashion weeks look pretty similar to your standard medical mask, some of the more outlandish designs have us wondering, would this actually protect you against the virus? And if there's one man we can turn to in these troubling times, it's ABC's Norman Swan.
So the last couple of weeks we've had lots of the big fashion weeks, New York Fashion Week, London Fashion Week, Milan. And there's been some bold sort of takes on the face mask. This was spotted on the streets of London this week. The mouth and the nose is technically covered. Is that going to protect you?
No, I mean, you can just look at it a bit more closely. This is not protective at all. There's lots of opportunities for escape around the edge. I wouldn't trust it for COVID in the slightest.
So this is pop star Billie Eilish. It's Gucci. I'm sure it's very expensive.
Looks very expensive and would be spreading COVID virus wherever it goes.
Okay, well, maybe this face shield from Louis Vuitton will pass the test. Let's hope so. It costs a little over 1,300 Australian dollars.
I've seen this one before. This is Louis Vuitton. I think this is uber cool, but pretty useless. The idea of a full face mask in Perspex does protect the eyes if you're a healthcare worker, but does not protect other people because it escapes around the edges. Get a stylish mask, wear that on top. You know, if it's a black mask, then you're still going to see the stylish shape of the face mask, but you've got to wear a mask underneath to get most effect.
So this popped up at New York Fashion Week on the streets. It's sort of like a Buzz Lightyear take on the face mask. What do you think?
Yeah, look, it would work on Mars, and I think it would work on Earth too. One of the problems here, you'll notice the filter on the front. If that's a filter to filter on the way in, that protects you against the virus, but if it's not got a two-way filter on the way out, you will spread the virus to other people. A little bit of a risk there until you understand what that valve is doing.
NEWSThe, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Such a killjoy. You're watching The Drum, and with me on the panel, presenter of Saturday Extra on ABCRN, Geraldine Doogue, senior reporter at HuffPost, NEWSThe, in Townsville, former Liberal Nationals MP Ewan Jones, and in Melbourne, cross-cultural consultant Tasneem Chopra. In just over 5 weeks, millions across America will be heading to the polls. The narrative up until this point has been etched in stone. Donald Trump is trailing behind. He hasn't expanded his base, and there's just too much ground to make up in the 5 weeks or so remaining. Sound familiar so far? Well, Donald Trump is hoping that his nomination of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court will change all this.
If the Senate does me the honour of confirming me, I pledge to discharge the responsibilities of this job to the very best of my ability. I love the United States, and I love the United States Constitution. While I am a judge, I'm better known back home as a room parent, carpool driver, and birthday party planner. Our children are my greatest joy, even though they deprive me of any reasonable amount of sleep.
Should she be confirmed, Conservative-leaning justices will hold a 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court, and according to Donald Trump, this could mean revisiting the 1973 decision that legalised abortion in the US.
So I didn't think it was for me to discuss that with her because it's something she's going to be ruling on, and this is what I was told. But if you look at her past actions and rulings, I guess she maybe would be in the category that you mentioned. I don't know. I can say this, that she is certainly conservative in her views and her rulings.
Amy Coney Barrett herself is a Catholic and has in the past faced questions over her membership of a group known as the People of Praise. The ABC's religion specialist Noel Debian filled us in on who they are.
People of Praise is basically a covenant community. It's not a church, it's an organisation of people who've promised to live in a certain way together. About 1,700 of them, they say on their own website, and they're across maybe 22 locations in the United States and Jamaica. And that group is largely Catholic, but it includes Lutherans, Baptists, lots of other people as well, because it's ecumenical. But it's associated with the Catholic Church because it's linked to Catholic charismatic renewal. That means, you know, they speak in tongues, they believe in the gift of prophecy, they have an emphasis on scripture, they share property, they share goods. It's a highly close Christian interdenominational community. Abortion would be something which would be out of the question. It goes with the ground of where these people lie and what they do. Other issues like gay and lesbian sexuality would be problematic, again, because of the biblical take that they have on how to interpret faith and life. So it's an unusual group with basically conservative social mores.
Nick, it was interesting watching on the weekend with Judge Amy Barrett in the Rose Garden there, and very Midwestern, though she was born in New Orleans, very much a Midwestern sensibility, it seemed to me. And she talked about carpooling and the 7 kids. And that she's standing beside, you know, the president who's been called a vulgarian, which after the grab them by the whatever, I think is a fair description. Did that seem stark, that contrast to you?
I think to some it would, but I think Trump's selection in Amy Coney Barrett, it makes a lot of sense. He has spent his administration appealing to the evangelical Catholic base that helped propel him to victory 4 years ago, and with his choices doing a similar thing. He picked a woman that is very overt about her Catholic faith and has deep conservative credentials, and I think he's hoping that this will shift some of the attention away from his lack of leadership during the coronavirus crisis and amp up Republicans and make the upcoming election less about the number of people who have died in America and